Tara on the Dungeon Craft Facebook group writes, I'm always having problems with players only showing up sporadically. I had to cancel the last 2 sessions because it was just 2 people. I have no idea how to solve this problem. Has this ever happened to you? You spend hours planning a session only to have 1 or more players not show up at the last second, and all of a sudden you and your game are canceled. I'm going to talk about what you can do about it today on Dungeon Craft.
Deathbringer here. Subscribe to the channel and sign up for the Deathbringer RPG newsletter at the link below.
Welcome to Dungeon Craft. I'm Professor Dungeon Master, and this channel is about all things role-playing games. And today we're talking about what to do when your players cancel out. This content is brought to you by the patrons of Dungeon Craft. Patrons get early access to videos, extended videos, bonus videos, live plays, and access to an exclusive Discord server. And if you want to support the channel, there's a link below. Tara got a lot of advice from people in the Dungeon Craft Facebook group, and I'm going to go over it before I give my own because it's really good. Paul says, the best game I've run in recent time was with only 2 players. Give them some hired help or have them run into other adventurers so the party is a bit bigger. Matt says, run the game. Don't let the ones who made the effort be punished. William says, keep going. One of my players drives for 90 minutes to play. It would be criminal to disappoint them. Steven says this might be the ideal time to playtest a different game like Cyberpunk or Murk Bori. Peter says, I have a couple of one-shots that a smaller party can play. Always a good idea. Matt says, look to the wisdom of the elders and run a West Marches style campaign. For those of you who are not familiar with it, that's like the old Keep on the Borderland, where there's a home base and a dungeon or a series of caves nearby that the players can sort of play one-off sessions in. And at the end of the game, they always return to the home base, so they don't need to be there for the previous session to know what's going on. Brad says, I try to keep sessions episodic. That way it's not important that every character attends each game. I strongly agree with Brad. I try to adhere to the Hickman Manifesto. That's Tracy Hickman's guide to designing adventures. And one of the rules is a game will have an honorable conclusion within 1 or 2 sessions. I've run a 30-year campaign, but every session is largely self-contained. 2 sessions at most. J. Stephen Kennedy, who's a professional game master, writes, how long is this pattern? 2 weeks, a month? How many players in total? Are those 2 always consistent? Context matters. Great advice, Jay, and because I don't have the context here, I'm going to assume that Tara has 4 or 5 players and they play on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis. But before we get to my answer, a quick word from our sponsor.
Deathbringer here. I heard a human once wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer. Fool! He should have grabbed his gods by the throat and made them build him a new world with Tailspire. Dun 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 da. That makes no sense to me.
You're supposed to do it Beavis and Butthead style.
What is a Beavis?
The first thing I would do is take a hard look at myself and my own game. It can be very difficult, but your game may suffer from SAG, slow-ass game. I talked about this in a previous video called Less Exposition, More Demolition. You can check that out at the end of this video. And I talk about sometimes the game might move too slowly and your players might be afraid to tell you that it's not as fun as it could be. That might not be it at all. The Game Master may be doing nothing wrong. But if my game is suffering from attrition, that's the first thing I would do. I would go introspective. But let's assume here that the Game Master has done nothing wrong and the players are just unreliable. This is what I would do. My first piece of advice is run the game for the 2 people who showed up. They did make the effort to show up. and you want to run for the players you have. I once went to the circus. It was the Big Apple Circus. It was a rainy night, and the tent was only like 1/3 filled. But they ran the circus anyway because the kids and adults who were like kids that attended had paid to see it. We were all excited about it. As a game master, you're an entertainer, and you play to the house no matter how many seats are filled. Also, make it the best game they've ever played. You don't hold back the good stuff for when more players show up. Run the good stuff today. Make your game all killer, no filler. Then, when the two players talk about your game and how great it was, the other players feel like they missed out and they have more of an incentive to make it to the next session. Canceling will kill your campaign. Consistency is so important if you want your campaign to last over 7-8 sessions. I have several different campaigns running at the same time, and 2 are weekly sessions. We play on a dedicated day, Wednesday and Friday, and so those are kind of locked in. My older players have a more flexible schedule because they have more commitments. But if there is a game scheduled for that day, I try my best not to break it. It can be tempting if you're playing, let's say, on a Friday night and one person isn't making it, maybe you should switch the night. And I find whenever I do that, it's like, then someone else can't make it. And sometimes even more frustrating, the person who said they couldn't make it on Friday, they can't make it on Tuesday. So now you screwed up the whole thing for a person that's really not going to show up. And I would consider replacing the missing person with more reliable, more considerate players. I'm a big advocate of inviting people who've never played role-playing games to play role-playing games. Like, invite people that you think are cool, they're creative, they have a lot of energy. Invite them to play the game and teach them the game. I'd rather play with a person who is considerate and will show up but doesn't know how to play a role-playing game than a person who is an expert at every single rule but doesn't show up regularly. Look, everyone has the same 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week. If someone really wants to do something, they will make it a priority. They will prioritize it and they will do that thing. And if they're not doing that thing, it's just not a priority. And as the Game Master, we have to accept that. No problem. Find someone for whom it is a priority. My buddy Jim, the tabletop engineer, adds, don't give those missing players experience points. Don't allow them to level up. If they come back and everyone's 4th level and they're still 1st level and their character gets killed, let the dice fall where they may. Those are the consequences when you don't show up. The absolute worst rule in 5e, to me, I think it's in the Dungeon Master's Guide, is about what to do if a player is missing, and it suggests they still get experience points anyway. And it's like, well, that incentivizes them not to show up. What's your incentive to show up for a session if you get as many experience points for not showing up? Like, your characters don't earn experience points if you're not playing them. Like, using that logic, if the whole group doesn't show up, their characters should all still gain experience points. It's ridiculous. The first time someone cancels out on one of my games for what I perceive to be a not very good reason, I immediately start, for the next session, I start writing out their subplots. Like, I generally try to make a scene for the rogue to do something sneaky, and the cleric will turn the undead or cure somebody, perform some sort of miracle. I plan a little scene for each character. But if I know someone is consistently not showing up, I stop doing that. It's not to punish them. It's so I don't drive myself crazy. I'm not going to go out of my way for this person who's not going out of their way to even show up at my game. The second time they cancel, I don't invite them back. And sometimes I replace them. And I probably won't confront them. Like, there's no reason to. If they're ghosting me, if they're just not showing up, I just won't invite them. If they ask me why, I'll tell them. It's stressful when I plan a game and you don't show up. And so we've decided to move along without you. Some Facebook members suggested talking it out with the other player, like you're adults. And I'm not against that. But at the same time, it's like, why? What are you going to say? I put a lot of time and effort into this game, and when you cancel out, it really screws up my plans. Like, your players don't know that? I've never made Thanksgiving dinner, but I watch my wife make it. It is very time-consuming. It takes her hours. That's pretty much what a role-playing game is like, with the Game Master as chef. This is my notebook. This is a game. This is a game. This is a game. This is a game. All the player has to do is show up and play their characters. It requires only basic empathy to understand that. Now, I might say something to the player, and I would do it exactly one time. As Benjamin Franklin says, a word to the wise is enough If the person doesn't get it after one time, they're just never going to get it. Some of my viewers said life gets in the way, and that is true to a certain extent. We have obligations. I recently canceled a session because I was invited to a wedding, and I was able to do it several weeks ahead of time because I got the wedding invitation several weeks ahead of time. For me, life gets in the way is not a good excuse for canceling at the last second. There are a few exceptions, if you're an emergency room surgeon, a firefighter, a member of SEAL Team 6. But in my experience, when people say life got in the way, it's usually because they forgot about their kid's piano recital. I have 3 kids and 3 jobs, and I can count on one hand how many times I have canceled out on sessions as both a game master and a player. One was because of a sudden death, and once because of emergency gallbladder surgery. I was literally being wheeled into surgery, and I texted my players, "This is the last thing I did. I don't think I'm going to make our session on Saturday." Look, I think you make decisions and you prioritize things. If you really want to play, you'll make the time to play. I have this great book. It's pamphlet size. It's called How to Be a Gentleman, and I've given it to my sons, and there's a page in there, and I'll never forget it. It says, when a gentleman accepts an invitation, he does not cancel unless he is sick or dead. Never because something better came up. I want to live in a world where role-playing games are subject to the same sort of etiquette as every other social occasion. You wouldn't cancel out at the last second at a birthday party or a wedding or a graduation or Thanksgiving dinner. So why would you do it at a role-playing game? Maybe that is one of the reasons why game masters are so hard to come by. So good luck, Tara. Hopefully your players will get the message, or you will soon find more accommodating, more cooperative players. But that's what I think. What do you think? Share in the comments below. Until the next time, may all your rolls be 20s.
A gentleman never drinks milk directly from the container. A gentleman always leaves the toilet seat down. A gentleman does not whine. And a gentleman always watches Dungeon Craft. Do you mind? I'm trying to read. A gentleman considers it a wise investment to pay for dancing lessons.